be getting started tonight on our final series for now with NEIU 19. Tonight's topic in our series on emotional growth and relationships in our parent learning workshops is focused on early intervention. So we have the pleasure of having Colleen and Molly share with us tonight about early intervention, what that looks like. If you have curiosity about if your child may need those support services, or maybe they already have them and you just have some questions, we may or may not be able to get to questions on this Zoom tonight, but you can certainly write down your questions, get them to us, and we will get them directly to them for the answers so that you have everything you need and that your time with us tonight was well spent. So I'm going to turn it over to Colleen and Molly so they can get started on sharing all of the information they have with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Elizabeth. So we'll introduce ourselves first. I am Colleen Penzone. I'm the Director of Special Education overseeing the Early Intervention Department at the NEIU.
And my name is Molly Weber. I am the Program Coordinator at NEIU for Early Intervention. I should put that in there.
So like Elizabeth
this is our world.
Go ahead. Yeah. Like Elizabeth said, we have the flyer of the series that we were doing this year. This is our last one of this set, and we thought that it would be really important just to give an overview of what early intervention is. Not only because I think some people have a lot of questions about what services that might be, but also because a lot of students that are in typical preschools or typical daycares all over Pennsylvania are receiving services. So sometimes parents of other children have questions about who are all these people coming in and out of the building, or what's going on in the classrooms as far as special education services. And it might be information that other people are seeking as well, not only for their own child, but maybe just to kind of know what's happening. We do a lot of partnerships and we do a lot of sharing of resources. So it'll be good to just give an overview of what that looks like. Okay, so I guess first of all, this slide really shows us what early intervention is, or who it is. There is a lot of distinction between the age groups and what's happening and all the transitions that are happening. So if you look at this image and you see that under the early intervention box, there are two programs. So there are two sides to early intervention. One is the infant toddler program, which is really all children from birth to age 3. So that is run in our county through Scranton Counseling Center or the Friendship House. Both have infant toddler programs. So any child birth to age 3 who would need early intervention services go through those programs. And then at the age of 3, they transition into a preschool program. So that is where it comes to us at the NEIU if you're living in Lackawanna or Susquehanna County. So if you're in a different county, then you might have a different program or that takes over that. But in general, at 3, you're moving into a preschool program. So the reason for that is because at 3, there's different funding streams. So you move from having an infant family service plan in the infant toddler world to having an actual IEP as a 3-year-old. So IEP services go from 3 to 21. So you're receiving a special education plan at the age of 3 that'll transition you into kindergarten, and it'll follow you through until you don't need it anymore. Some students might need it until the rest of their school career, and some students might not need it, going into kindergarten. Sometimes they just need that little boost early on. But we cover that age 3 to 5. It's really 3 to kindergarten because sometimes students will go to kindergarten at the age of 6. So we say 3 to 5, but it's really 3 to K. And then we transition students at the age, at kindergarten age, and then they move into that school age program, which is the K to 12 district side of the special education. So this picture kind of really oversees that process. There are several different environments that we provide services in, and I think it's important to know that early intervention services, which is really special ed for preschool, is not a placement. It is really a service. So we provide services in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places. So we have several environments that can happen. One of those environments is an early childhood environment. So like WellKind, any kind of preschool, daycare, early childhood program that has children that need special education services, we could provide those services there. So we would have a teacher or a speech therapist or an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, a vision teacher, a hearing teacher, whatever it might be that the child needs services for, can go into the preschool or the early childhood environment and provide those services there. They might be once a week, they might be twice a week, they might be a half an hour, they might be a little longer. It depends on, every child is different depending on what the team discusses. So that's one setting. Another environment that we could provide those services is in a specialized setting. So that second one on the list there is called early childhood special education environment. And those environments are really designed by us, and we have them designed as specialized programming. So we have some of those classrooms, we call them, in Archibald, we have some in Dunmore, we have one in Susquehanna County, and we have one in a Head Start center. So we're kind of all over the place, but they're designed, they're shorter parts of the day. Some are an hour and 45 minutes, some are a little bit longer. The students just come to receive their services. Sometimes they get transportation, sometimes the parents bring them. It just depends on the child and the need. Other places are service provider location. So that just means that we're kind of meeting people in the best place possible. So if a child needs speech therapy and that's all they need, for example, and sometimes they don't go to preschool yet, their parents aren't just don't need them to be involved, maybe there's a stay-at-home parent, so they decide that they might do that at a library once a week. So that would be called a service provider location. We choose the library, we meet there weekly to do the speech therapy. That's an example of that. Another option could be a separate day school, and that is something like Scranton School for the Deaf, Hard of Hearing children. So we have students there, and a lot of times they're receiving their specialized instruction there through the staff there, but we share resources to make sure that they're getting their IEP services met through there. And then other environment might be home. We do have some situations where it makes more sense to provide those services in the home. And that's all discussed throughout those team meetings. So there's lots of places that it can happen, but it's really about the service that's needed, and that's discussed at each IEP meeting with the child when we finish the evaluation. So I will let Molly take over.
I was going to say, you want me to go next? All right. So what qualifies my child for early intervention? And the next, I think in 2 or 3 slides, we're going to kind of break down exactly what it looks like. So if you believe that your child may qualify, or if you would like to get your child evaluated, or, if you're working with someone who might say, oh, I don't know that my daughter is catching up with the rest of the kids, that could be something that you can get evaluated for. So we will go through that entire timeline to kind of let you know, what it looks like. So in order to qualify for early intervention, children between the ages of 3 and 5 they have to have a developmental delay in 1 or more areas of development. So that is when they're eligible. We use evidence-based assessment tools used to determine if the child has the delay. So it's a 25% delay in one of those areas, or negative 1.5 standard deviations below the mean. A medical diagnosis can also qualify a child for early intervention. And if that's specifically designed instruction is needed. Colleen, I'm actually the negative 1.5 standard deviation. Do you want to go into that piece right there?
Sure. It's just it's just based on norms. So it really just kind of looks like, if you've ever seen the bell curve, it really just means that we have, you look at the scores and you have your average scores, and then you look at where your child falls. And if they fall too far to the left, so negative 1.5, below the mean being the average score, that is what Pennsylvania determines as eligible for special education. So different states have different eligibility categories, but it's just based on the average score for the children and how far away you are from that. But negative 1.5 actually equals 25% delay. So delay as far as the scoring goes for the testing. So that's all that means.
Right. you want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So as Colleen said, we are a service. She did mention a couple of these. So specialized instruction, that would be a teacher service. So if you are, at a preschool or at a daycare and you see that a child has someone coming in from early intervention, they might be working on academic goals. They could be working on, different slights of behaviors, first then boards, choices, things like that. That's what our specialized instruction teachers are working on. We also have speech therapy, and like Colleen said, of where it's being offered. So we have kids come to our centers, their parents bring them for a half hour to get out client speech therapy services. We have the itinerant speech therapy services. So those guys are going out into the preschools and daycares. They might meet a parent at the library to deliver those speech services. And we also have something that it's called a language group. So that's for kiddos that really can benefit from that social language piece. So they are transported to our center in Dunmore, and it varies on times and days that they come, but they do more of that social speaking. So they take all of the goals that they're working on with speech in their SLP, and then they're able to use it within the group setting with peers. We also have the occupational therapists that service all of our children. And if the child does get occupational therapy, that could be working on anything from learning to cut, fine motor, grasping things. I'm trying to think of what else. If a weighted blanket might be, maybe a compression vest, learning how to regulate that sensory piece. That is what our occupational therapists work on. And then we also have physical therapists that work with us. They're working on that gross motor. So jumping, safely going down the stairs, safely walking around their environment, stretching, I think, as well. Orientation and mobility. We do have therapists that work with orientation and mobility. So if we have students that are having issues with their orientation, balance, walking around, it also kind of goes in hand for a student that might be blind or visually impaired, just kind of moving around in their environment. We also have hearing therapy and vision therapy. So our hearing therapists, our hearing teachers, and our vision teachers, they're working on anything from hearing aid fixing and tweaking, and working with the families on all the resources that is out for vision and hearing. I was going to say, did I miss anybody? I don't think so. All right. So I can start a little bit when I talked about timelines. So this is kind of the whole process from start to finish. And when I say finish, I mean the child would then start their services with us. So it all begins with the referral. A child could be referred by any adult who has a direct relationship with the child. So a pediatrician can refer a parent, a teacher that's working with the student in a preschool or a daycare, family member, child care worker. So when we get that referral information, we issue what is called a PTE, or a permission to evaluate. So that is sent to the parents or the guardians to say, the pediatrician is saying that maybe we should get evaluated, or can we look at certain things during the evaluation? So the parent or guardian would sign that permission to evaluate. Then that starts our timeline, because everything that we have is delegated by days and times. So we only have a certain amount of times to get the evaluation in, write the IEP, or the individualized educational program, and then we have a specific amount of time when we have to, from the IEP to the time that we see the child. So once the referral comes in and the permission to evaluate is signed, that starts our time clock to then be evaluated. So the evaluation is completed with a team where all 5 developmental domains are screened or assessed. So we have the cognitive, the communication, social, emotional, physical, and adaptive. So if your child may be struggling with that fine motor, we might put an occupational therapist on that team, so that they can look over and assess in occupational therapy. Cognitive, that would be for the teacher. The communication piece would be the SLP. Social, emotional, that kind of goes hand in hand with both cognitive and communication. So both with our teachers and our SLPs. And then anything in adaptive, physical, that could be the OT, the PT. So all of these domains are assessed within that evaluation. The evaluation timeline is 60 days from the signed permission to evaluate. So as soon as the parent or guardian signs that permission, we have 60 days to get that evaluation done and completed. Then once that evaluation piece is done, and what that looks like is you might come up to our main office up in Archibald. Our evaluation team might meet you somewhere. I'm not sure. I don't know if they've ever done any at Wellkind, but we have had places where, if it was a training day, we might use that area to do a evaluation as well. But mostly you will come up to our office up in Archibald, and then the evaluation team brings you and your child back. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of different activities that they do. And then after that evaluation is completed, you then are able to leave. From there, we look to, so once the evaluation is completed, if the child qualifies for early intervention services, then the IEP will be completed. So after the evaluation is done, they go through everything, they score everything. If your child has the 25% delay in one of those domains, then they would qualify. So if they have that 25% delay in, say, communication, then they would qualify for the speech and language pathologist to write the IEP and deliver speech services. So let's see. So then once the IEP is completed, then an IEP meeting will be held, which that would be the family comes, the entire team that'll be servicing that child. They come and they walk through the entire IEP. They talk about the goals they want to work on based on the evaluation. So if the child is having, if they're having difficulties with, I just keep saying cutting or pinching something. So if they're having difficulties with cutting, then maybe that would be a goal in the IEP that the team would work on with the child based off the evaluation. So the timeline for the IEP meeting is 30 days from the completed eval report. So it does seem like it's a rather long time, but we've got the permission to evaluate that signed. Then we have 60 days to do the evaluation. Then after the evaluation is completed, we then have 30 days to write the IEP and hold that IEP meeting. So then after the IEP is agreed upon, the whole team is there. Parents, guardians, we're talking about different goals that you want to see, different things within the IEP. Then we would look at the service delivery. So as soon as the IEP is agreed upon with all parties, then we have 14 days to deliver that service. And a lot of the times, like we mentioned earlier, if the child received infant toddler services, that's kind of another little different process, but it's all of transition. So I'm trying to think, is there anything else I missed with the timelines, Colleen?
No, I think as you were talking, though, I was just thinking in the beginning about the referrals. You mentioned screening. So just to kind of FYI, most early childhood settings, like a preschool or daycare, are doing screenings for all children. So everybody that's in their program are doing developmental screens just to kind of even see the progress that the children are making within their own program. And so sometimes that screening process will kind of highlight or red flag somebody, say, hey, maybe you need an evaluation. So a lot of the referrals come through that process. And then other things are, we've had like pediatricians or other family members kind of refer, but we usually do, I know it says we send out a permission to evaluate. So of course that's true, but a lot of times we're calling you first. So we're calling the family just to say, did you see these concerns? We got this referral, how do you feel about this? Because maybe there's other concerns too that you have. And so there is a lot of calling, a lot of conversation happening throughout this whole process. This gives you just a snapshot of the timelines. And then I think,
and Colleen, for our families, we do parents may forget, but we do an ages and stages questionnaire, which is the screening tool upon enrollment, and also a social and emotional one when families enroll with us. Sometimes then we would need to do a new one maybe a year later, if things are starting to show up that we may want to be tracking or do a little bit further, get further information on, or if a parent brings up something, we usually just fill out an ages and stages, and that's our first step. So parents may only ever see one, because parents get one at enrollment, and fill one out. They may only ever see one once, if their child is developing with our assessment tools, and there's no need to do another.
And that is the tool that most everybody uses in our area. So the ages and stages, we're very familiar with that tool. Okay. So we do have something called least restrictive environment. And this is part of, I don't know if you've heard this before, if you've heard that language, LRE, least restrictive environment. It's kind of a common term when in the special education world. And it is part of the law. And it basically just says that individuals with disabilities should be provided those services to the, in the natural setting to the maximum extent possible with their non-disabled peers. So, the state recognized many years ago, going back, into the 60s and 70s, that children were always being segregated. Children with special needs were in specialized classes. They were always separated from their peers. And naturally, not everybody in the school system was looking to put them back in with their peers. So they kind of stayed in that track throughout the rest of their time. And what people were discovering was that there was the social skills were not developing as naturally. They didn't have these great models of peer models. And then over time, through a lot of research and a lot of efforts from some of our, from some of the research, was basically saying that children are going to develop quicker. They're going to pick up more skills by watching their peers. And so it became part of the law to have not us, but special education be part of the natural environment. And so that a lot of times means children in their preschool settings, and in the school age world, it means in the general education curriculum. So instead of having the special ed students in a separate classroom, in a separate building, in a separate area, they want to see children integrated together. And then the staff, the teachers and the teachers' aides and the program directors and everybody involved, the adults, the parents, the special ed staff, all working together to kind of accommodate things and provide supports and services within that setting to the best of our ability, right? Sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes there are children that really do need the specialized setting. So the specialized settings still exist. But it is important for us to look at that to make sure that we're looking so that students do get their typical peer engagement and that modeling. It enables their social skill development to be, having those peers around and to accelerate faster. Exposure to age appropriate material. Sometimes when we have students in a specialized setting, the materials, the tools, and the curriculums are a little bit modified to the extent that they're not accessing then their age appropriate toys that they should be, or age appropriate games and things that they should be. So to have, exposure to that is going to also help them develop quicker. Also just a sense of belonging, a sense of being with your peers, where you would be if you hadn't had a disability. And even in a school age setting, just to be around, all of the other kids that you're seeing and not to feel segregated. And then a concept of self-awareness is to start to kind of understand where they fit in this world, what they need in this world, and to be a little bit of a self-advocate as well, to be in a situation where you say, I need X, Y, and Z. Students can start to learn that very early on by using this environment.
You can do the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We work a lot. We work very closely with a lot of different local supports, local agency supports. We'll go through this list. These are not things that we personally at the intermediate unit do, and it's not necessarily something that we provide with the IEP, but we are in constant contact, constant communication. We're forever updating all of our resource lists of developmental pediatricians that are out out there. Behavioral health right now, that's a big topic out in the world. So we are constantly reaching out to different areas, different agencies, seeing what they offer. We're making that connection so then we can work together to best support the child. There is the Infant Early Childhood Mental Health agency, and they come in. I know Liz has had, I believe this group has come into Wellkind for certain students. They kind of help on the preschool end. If we have students that could be struggling with mental health, could be struggling with behaviors, different health agencies. So if you're looking for just say a feeding clinic, if you have a very picky eater, or if you have an adverse eater, so if they can only eat crunchy things, maybe they start to gag if you give them macaroni and cheese, even though I know that's like the most popular thing to eat for kids out there. But there's different feeding clinics. So there's all different other health agencies that are out there. And we don't know what we don't know. So when we have those conversations with the parents, or with you, we might be asking those questions like, do you have, are there any allergies? Do you need any supports with that? We do have a lot of resources that we can at least connect to the families with these other supports. There's also clinical therapies. So Pivot does physical therapy, speech, if you've ever heard of someone going to Allied for speech services. So those are clinical settings, speech, OT, and PT services. So a child could be getting educational therapies with IU19 and early intervention with their IEP, and they can also be getting clinical therapies. So at Allied, they might be getting more speech settings or more OT therapies. There's other agencies that we have, parent groups, local supports. So Colleen and I and our awesome service coordinators, they're kind of the ones that you'll have a lot of communication with in the beginning. So we're always constantly looking for parent groups, play groups, any organization that might be out there that is available, whether it's looking for your GED. I think there's the outreach center, right? Is that on here? Yes. So we just had an awesome meeting with an outreach center. They do GED support. They do newborn in-home support for a newborn baby, for the mother, like a doula. And that's all free. So all of that we house, anything that we get. And then the more we're communicating with parents and guardians, the more we're having those conversations, we know which resources to give. And if anyone's looking for something, I like to say that we're the keeper of the resources, but we want to give them away as much as possible.
We try to be, for sure.
Yes.
So one thing too, I just want to stress about the behavioral health resources is that I know Molly mentioned that's a long list of resources in our area, and it's a very popular list because we do have a lot of children that struggle with behavior. But I just want to point out that behavior is technically not a developmental domain. So when a child struggles with behavior, that isn't necessarily something that a teacher would work on as far as an IEP goal. So for us, it looks like a social emotional goal, right? So those two things go hand in hand. So when a child might be struggling with challenging behavior, we're not a behavioral agency where we have behavioral specialists that are modifying behavior. We would work on social emotional skills, skill building in that area. So looking to learn how to, share or take turns or wait, how to wait and take turns, or how to accept no, or how to, navigate your environment without getting frustrated, or we're using some calm down things, and we're using some breathing techniques, things like that. So that's social emotional skills goals that our special ed teacher would work on with the child if they need that. But sometimes the behavioral health agencies they have behavioral specialists, behavioral health technicians, they're called, that would come in and work with the child on a treatment plan, and they look at modifying behavior and really trying to change that behavior in a different way than we would look at skill building. Sometimes those things go hand in hand very nicely. So we do offer that list of resources a lot of times. The other thing about behavioral health resources is that sometimes if they have a staff available, they would have somebody come in and work with the child at the preschool for, so many hours a week, which can be very nice because sometimes the preschool, the early childhood center struggle when you have a class of 20 and you have a child that really has some challenging behaviors or some frustrations or some, maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's just trying to work through that, frustration. And it's hard to navigate all of those things because they need some individualized help, right? They need some individualized focus and somebody to just help with the calming and the breathing. And so a teacher can't be all in a lot of places at once. So they do they do a wonderful job with it. But if you have several of those children, it can get more difficult. So these behavioral health agencies are a wonderful resource, because if they can add somebody to the room, even for a couple hours a week or so many hours, just to support that staff, to say, hey, well, I'm going to work just with Johnny on these types of things, that's just a lot more support that the child gets. So it is a great resource that we're always encouraging parents to reach out to. Okay, so do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, do you want to take this one and I'll take next?
Sure. Yep. So this slide shows our pyramid model for social emotional competence, and that lines right up with what I was just talking about. So when we work on social emotional skills, we're looking to work on things that fall in line with this pyramid model. So the pyramid model basically means that we have layers of intervention for students for all students. So if you look at this pyramid on the screen, the bottom, the yellow, kind of shows that you have a system. So a child care center like Wellkind has an effective workforce. An effective workforce just basically means that there are policies and procedures in place. You have a director and you have somebody that's working to make sure that everybody's getting the appropriate training, and they are doing that, right? So even just doing this, even having some parent connections, having these parent trainings is part of that effective workforce. So we are working together. There's a lot of things happening at Wellkind. There's a lot of things happening in a lot of the early childhood centers, but that's that bottom layer, that foundation, right? The policies and procedures in place for the behavior policies and all the different policies that they have. That's the foundation. And then the next layer is that universal promotion, which also is like preventing behavior. So in the blue there, it shows high quality supportive environments, nurturing responsive relationships. So that basically says that all of the staff are working to build, and they're focusing on relationship building with the students, with the families. It's a nurturing focus. And they have high quality supports, which just basically means people have the appropriate training, the right materials, the right, high quality materials and curriculums and things like that. So all of that is happening, and that just kind of shows you the different layers of support that we have for students in this way. And then the green, which is really that secondary promotion, is another prevention method to kind of say, hey, we've done all of these things. We have all of these great things happening. We have a good, effective workforce. We have great, high quality environments, and we have great relationships with our students. But we still have a couple of students that are struggling with challenging behavior. And that happens in every setting, right? Because there are still some children that need extra. So in that green area, that is our secondary prevention. That kind of is the extra layer for students that might need extra support. So that just means that those students might get a little extra social emotional skills. Maybe it's the specialized instruction where a teacher is working on that with them. Maybe it's a little behavior plan that says, you do X, Y, and Z, and then you can receive a reward. Maybe it's something designed for small groups of students, or a student that just basically gives them that extra layer of support. And then when you do that, you should really hardly have any students that need this level of, of support. But you do always sometimes have one or two students that really just need individualized, very intensive instruction. And so that's the top of the pyramid. And it basically means that you're reaching out for those behavioral health services, you're reaching out for all of those other supports, the early intervention services, and everybody's working together for that one child because they do have a high level of need. But it shows in a pyramid because we want it to be that we're doing all of these things so that we really are supporting all of the children with these layers, and we should have the least amount of children that need that intensive intervention at the top of the pyramid.
So as So as Colleen was talking about that pyramid model, where we have that base foundation, that large foundation, all the way up to the top there. So we also do a pyramid model in our supports that we provide to the daycares and the preschools. So if you've heard of any of these before, so we might come in on a consult basis, which means we are coming in usually once every 2 weeks, once a month, and we're checking in on progress. We're checking in on the goals. We might run some goal work, we might take some notes just to kind of see where we're at and how we're doing, and if we need to change anything. We then have the next level, which would be that direct service. So that might be a teacher from the IU, a specialized instruction teacher, or an SLP working directly with that student. So whether they are maybe working with their IEP goals over, at a side table, whether they're coming into maybe morning circle and working on the IEP goals as the student is working within morning circle. So it's working directly. We also have small groups that we offer. So maybe the speech and language pathologist or the specialized teacher, maybe they have 2 to 3 students coming over, and all those students together are working on similar goals or same thing. So they might be working on sharing, they might be working on taking turns, they might be working on initiating play, because so many kids that we see don't know how to say to a friend, I want to play with you. How do I play? So we're working on a lot of those skills in that small group setting. Then we also, the other side is offer that coaching support. So we might be helping the teacher, the preschool teacher, the daycare teacher that's within the classroom, or the staff that's within that preschool or daycare. We might be directly helping them with IEP support. So if there's something listed in the IEP and the teacher says, I really don't know how I'm going to do that in class, or I really don't know how I could implement that, that's where we could come in with, if we have resources, if we have the item that we're working on, say it's a first then board or a schedule, we would come in and bring that to the teacher and kind of help the teacher through what that IEP goal means and how to collect data, or how it's beneficial within the classroom. I said we're the holder of the resources. So resources for the preschool classroom. I kind of mentioned, schedules, first then boards, anything that we might be able to print, laminate, develop, if we're working directly with a goal. So maybe it's matching, maybe it is isolating or picking out of 1 or 2 options. So our speech and language pathologist and our specialized teachers, they might make activities and be able to give that to the preschool teacher or staff within the classroom to say, hey, this might really work when it comes to Johnny and Sally being able to work on taking turns, or being able to ask for help when they need to. And then we also work with preschool administrators. So perfect example right now, and Colleen and I love our relationship with Liz at Wellkind. We truly appreciate it. So Colleen and I, as administrators, we are always trying to reach out to do communication with other preschool administrators to see how can we help you more? How can we develop some sort of training series? What are your parents looking for? How can we assist? Do we need extra help with IEP work? Do the teachers need extra help? So Colleen and I, as administration, can provide that support, and also our teachers and our speech, they also develop that rapport and that communication with the administrators as well, to say, hey, I'm going to have 3 kids here today. I would love it if you came and saw what we're doing. Or even, hey, would we be able, even if it's just asking, hey, can we do our service delivery right here? Maybe it's outside on a beautiful day. I'm just pulling because there's so many possibilities, but we do truly love working with all of our ECEs that we work with, and keeping those connections and keeping that communication open, because as everyone says, no matter what, it does take a village to raise a child.
We had a question in the chat. Did you see? Is that what you were just?
I did actually. So Julian wrote it in here about transition. So we could talk a little bit about transition. So if your child gets services through us and they are transitioning into kindergarten next year, so we do have meetings with every district that we all come together, the parent, us, and the district, and we kind of give like a little introduction as to this is maybe what you can expect. So those are actually currently happening right now. And they happen so early because we want to make sure that the district is ready to receive any of our kids that have IEPs. We want to make sure that we stay in the timelines. We want to make sure that anything that we need to talk about, the goals that we're working on currently. So all of that, depending on the district may adopt the IEP that we have. So that means the IEP goals and all the services would then transfer right over to school age, and they may adopt that IEP until they do a re-eval, or they may re-evaluate as the child comes into kindergarten to see what the child qualifies for. So it definitely is different, especially if you have been in early intervention at a infant toddler stage. Infant toddler services look a lot different than preschool services. And preschool services could look different in the school age services. If you've gotten infant toddler services, it might have been a longer duration, maybe at the home. And then in the preschool setting, we're looking to get into the daycare, get into the preschool, kind of have that one-on-one work. And then it could look different at the school district level. So they would do the re-eval and they would assess on based if the student or the child still qualifies. Did you want to add anything on that, Colleen? Oh, wait, you're muted.
Thanks. I know you did explain it well. I think the question was saying if the school doesn't allow it. So yeah, I mean, that's not possible. So the school has to allow it but Molly did explain it very well, saying if they still qualify, so they will reevaluate to see if they qualify under those school age categories. So there are outside resources though. Like, so if you were nervous that say your son may not qualify because he's made so much progress, there are outside clinical services that he could get, like a Marywood or Pivot or things like that, that if you still wanted to get that speech service. But if he does qualify, the school will definitely provide services similar.
Yep.
And like Molly said, those meetings are happening at, throughout
currently.
the next month. So, yeah.
I was in one all day today.
Talk through those things. Yeah.
Yeah,
and so
absolutely.
go ahead. These are just some pictures of some of our staff. So you could see the ones with the children in it are like in our classrooms. Those are our specialized settings. So you can see the bottom left, we do have somebody working with an iPad. So they're very integrated into for students that are nonverbal. So they're working on those core boards to teach the students to use them to communicate. We have a lot of classrooms utilizing that. So the students are able to choose the icons to say, I want pretzels, or, I'm done, or whatever it is that we're trying to help them communicate to get their needs met. We have a lot of different activities going on. This is our OT, Emily, holding the snails. She's always got fun activities planned. And then in the center with the couple of us there, you can see Molly and I, that as one of our transition events, where when we move from infant toddler to preschool, we meet with the families. Usually it's done at a restaurant, and we go and we present something very similar like this so that they know the timelines and they know what's coming. And so we meet with the families. That was just a picture of us doing that. So, and some of our other teachers and groups. Anything you want to add, Molly?
Nope. We love showing our kids off and our staff when we can, because we have an awesome staff.
Yep, here's some more. Just some of our kids having fun on the swing. Our little girl using some sign. Our iPad, one of our speech therapists who ordered all those iPads. They're not ordered, but they got a grant for some of our families with students with diagnoses. That was a fantastic event. And then our last slide is really just our contact. So this is our emails. You're welcome to email us if you have any specific questions. But for referrals, we have our referral secretary listed there, Deborah Kolazinski. She takes all the referrals. You can email or call her, and she's the one that would get things situated and ready for to get a permission to evaluate started. And Maria Zielinski does that as well. Deb is the first contact, and Maria does that if Deb's out. So we have two people that can help with that. And does anybody have any other specific questions before we end a little early today.
I think too, I just wanted families to know that if we'll be having assessments coming up in February where that's an opportunity to talk to your child's teacher. If you have any questions at that time or you have any concerns, sometimes there's things that come up at home that don't present themselves in the classroom. So it's important to share that with the teacher, because just because your child may be meeting certain goals for us, but maybe you're having certain struggles at home. So it's important to keep that communication open so we can connect you with the right resources that can help your child and your family succeed.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you,
Thanks,
Elizabeth, for giving us
everybody.
this opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for joining us. And this is, again, our last series in this grouping that we have put together and that Colleen and Molly have shared with us over the last few months. But we look forward to other opportunities. And it's really important for us to know what you want to know more of as well. It's really important because that helps us guide our decision making and what we present. So please let us know what questions you have.